Julia, welcome to Speaker Spotlight.
Thank you.
It's fantastic to have you here and to talk about your work that you do in the field of neurodiversity. Tell me a bit about your career background and what you do.
Um, I'm a psychologist by training, so I did my PhD with Professor Maggie Snowling, who's a big name in the field of dyslexia, I think, looking at really early development for very young children who might go on to have dyslexia or reading difficulties. So I've always had that focus on dyslexia, and part of my early work also was looking at the links between language difficulties and dyslexia, which again has been a theme that's gone right through my career.
And especially amongst early years, so even before attending school or nursery or anything like that, those signs of dyslexia and any neurodiverse condition can begin then, can't it?
Yeah, that's right. So our work was looking at children who had a relative who had dyslexia. So we knew that they were likely around about a third to a half of children who have a parent or a sibling with dyslexia go on to be dyslexic themselves. So we looked at the characteristics of those children and looked at and then retested them later on to see what kinds of early characteristics were most linked to um, dyslexia. And yeah, so you could see signs in terms of the phonological skills and so their understanding of the sounds in words, and um, some signs also in their speech patterns, how much they were speaking and so on. So uh, that really got me thinking about the overlap between language difficulties and dyslexia as well.
And what you're saying there, you mentioned previously about like dyslexia, neurodiverse conditions, they're hereditary, so they run in families. And a lot of the time, when a child or a young person receives a diagnosis of dyslexia, for example, it's the parents are often a bit like mind boggled in a way, like, where's this come from? But actually, sometimes dyslexia can manifest in other ways. And sometimes when you receive that report and you look at your child's behavior, sometimes you're like, oh, maybe I'm a bit like that, or maybe that's where it's come from. So that's where the adult side of it comes in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the world has really changed in terms of how much we recognize dyslexia and when we recognize dyslexia. So you do have that experience again and again that if I ask parents whether they've ever had dyslexia or literacy difficulties, they'll often say, well, I was never diagnosed, but I always had problems. I was always told off for poor spelling or bad handwriting, or I was always the slowest reader, or they'll often have stories like that. Um, yeah, which has actually led on to kind of one of the other aspects of my work, which is about linking up social and emotional well-being and dyslexia, and how having that diagnosis of dyslexia um, changes how people feel about themselves, and whether it's positive, gives people more of an identity, and yeah, what effect the diagnosis itself has.
And absolutely, a diagnosis not only can be life changing, but it is your perception of yourself. And even at first, like any diagnosis, it can be hard to take in, and there's almost like a name for something that you've struggled with all your life. But then later, it's almost that reassuring thing in a way. Actually, you can be a bit more kinder to yourself. You think, oh, actually, it's okay that I struggle with this as an answer to why I've always had these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also um hopefully make contact with other people who've had similar challenges and feel like you're not alone, and yeah, you're not uh struggling, yeah, struggling against the world. I guess you've got a kind of a group of people who've experienced similar things. I think that's really important.
And as well, that's the beauty of the Dyslexia Show and now the Dyscalculia Show, the fact that because you do feel like the only one. It can be really isolated at a time, whether you're a parent or a young person or a teacher or whatever your work walk of life is. it can be quite isolating. When you go to show, not only you hear incredible speakers, but you also meet so many like-minded attendees as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think before the Dyslexia Show was around, we had um, uh, conferences that were more for academics or professionals in the world, but weren't necessarily accessible for parents or teachers who just wanted to know a bit about dyslexia. Whereas the Dyslexia Show does a really good job of mixing the kinds of information, so you can go and pick and choose what kind of issues you'd like to know more about and get support about, yeah, the social side or the legal side, or as well as the education side. So yeah, it's really nice.
And you'll be, of course, be one of the keynote speakers at the conference. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be talking about and what you'll be focusing on?
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about a project that I've been working on with SASC, who are the uh, sort of, oh, sorry,
Okay.
I always forget what SASC are, but they are the Assessment Standards Committee. So they monitor and regulate assessments for dyslexia. And this links up with some of what I was talking about whether that assessment and identification, how important that is for people's development and identity. But so the new project that I'll be talking about this year is about definitions and assessment guidelines for dyslexia. So despite the fact that we have lots of information about dyslexia, we don't necessarily have consensus about how dyslexia should be defined or assessed. And what we've been doing with SASC and with Maggie Snowling, my previous supervisor, over the past year is doing a Delphi consensus study, which is a study where you ask lots of experts to give their anonymous views on lots of statements about dyslexia, pull out which statements have most agreement or consensus, and then look at whether other statements could be changed to get more agreement, and then use that to draw out what we can agree on about dyslexia and how we can move forward in the field. So I'm going to be talking about this project and how we're using it to develop a updated definition of dyslexia, which can be used to guide assessment and think about kind of ideal assessment framework for the future.
Be really beneficial for assessors actually attending the conference to hear your talk and hear your latest findings.
Yeah, it's actually worked out. We were hoping that we'd have something published before the Dyslexia Show, but I think actually the Dyslexia Show is going to be one of the first places that you'll be able to hear about the findings, because yes, it's hot off the press. We're still working on it now.
Exclusive. No, it's really exciting. Julia, it's been fantastic speaking to you. I'm so excited to hear your talk at the conference. But in the meantime, where can people find more about you and your work?
I'm based at Coventry University, so if you search Coventry University /GLEA, which is GLEA, that's the Research Centre for Global Education and Attainment that I'm part of at Coventry University.